The Edge of Perception. Chapter 1. Echoes in the Hallway. As the last remnants of autumn fell from the trees, I found myself standing at the edge of my hometown, holding an old cardboard box filled with souvenirs from college. My heart pounded with a mix of excitement and trepidation as I walked up to the small apartment building where I would spend the holidays. The holiday lights were already beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky, but it was the quiet that struck me first, a stark contrast to the bustling city I had left behind. I moved quickly, unpacking and arranging my few belongings in the modest living room. It wasn't much, but it felt like home. Or at least it should have. As I settled into my new surroundings, I started to notice things that made me uneasy. The walls seemed too thin. Every creak of the floorboards echoed loudly in the silent apartment. That night, as I lay in bed trying to sleep, I heard it, a faint whisper coming from the hallway. It was barely there, but it was enough to make my pulse quicken. I held my breath, listening intently. But the sound disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Shaking off the feeling of unease, I closed my eyes and tried to fall asleep, only to be jolted awake by a sudden movement in my peripheral vision. I sat up in bed, heart racing, searching the room for anything out of place. But everything seemed exactly as I had left it moments before. Telling myself it was just stress catching up with me, I lay back down and closed my eyes again, but the whispers returned, more persistent this time. This wasn't ordinary. Something was definitely off. The next few days passed in a haze of anxiety and confusion. The noises grew louder. Creaking floorboards, muffled voices, occasional footsteps outside my door. Each sound made me question my own sanity, but I couldn't ignore the creeping sensation that something sinister was lurking in my new home. Mr. Finchley, my neighbor, seemed to notice my distress. He was an elderly man with a curious demeanor, a habit of staring out the window for long periods and muttering to himself under his breath. Every time I saw him, he would offer a friendly nod or wave, but there was always something unsettling about his eyes. It felt like he was watching me more closely than he should. When I finally confided in my friend, Lily, she tried to reassure me. "It's probably just the building settling," she said with a smile. "You know how old houses can be. Just ignore it and you'll get used to it." But deep down, I knew that wasn't enough. Something was happening, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all somehow connected to Mr. Finchley. One night, after another long day of unsettling noises, I woke up to a horrifying sight. My window was wide open, and I had no memory of opening it. The cold air rushed in as I jumped out of bed, heart pounding. I closed the window quickly and barricaded myself behind locked doors, but the fear lingered like a shadow over my thoughts. As Christmas approached, so did the sense of dread. I was trapped in a nightmare that seemed to be growing more real with each passing day. And no matter how hard I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, the edge of perception was quickly fading away, leaving me teetering on the brink of paranoia. Chapter 2. Shadows on the Wall. As the holidays loomed closer, so did the sense of unease in my apartment. Mr. Finchley's presence seemed to grow more intrusive with each passing day. He started leaving cryptic notes at my doorstep, lines of poetry that made no sense, or simple words like watching or waiting. Each note was signed only with an unfamiliar name, Raphael. My curiosity quickly turned into concern. I began researching the history of the building, hoping to find answers about this mysterious figure and his connection to my life. What I uncovered was both shocking and chilling. The building had once been an asylum for troubled youth, a place where many had suffered and some had not survived. The more I learned, the more I felt like I was being watched. Shadows seemed to flicker at the corners of my eyes, and I caught glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, as though someone were following me. My possessions started disappearing, small items that I couldn't account for, like a favorite notebook or a cherished picture frame. Lily visited one weekend and noticed my growing anxiety. "You need to get over this obsession with Finchley," she said, trying to sound reassuring, but failing to hide her concern. "You're starting to lose yourself in all this paranoia. You should focus on finding a job or something, anything that gets your mind off him." Her words didn't help. If anything, they made me feel more isolated. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Finchley was somehow connected to the eerie events unfolding around me. And with each passing day, my fear of him seemed to grow stronger. One night, as I lay in bed trying to sleep, I heard a noise coming from outside my window. I stumbled out of bed and peeked through the curtains, but all I saw was the empty alley below. The sound came again, louder this time, a faint whisper that sent chills down my spine. I hurried back inside and barricaded myself in my room, listening intently for any further signs. In the silence that followed, a realization struck me. Mr. Finchley wasn't alone in the building. Whatever was haunting my apartment had to be connected to him, and whatever it was growing stronger with each passing day. Chapter 3. The Dark Corner. The nights grew colder, but the fear within me burned brighter. I knew I had to confront Mr. Finchley and uncover the truth behind the mysterious events plaguing my life. I approached his apartment one evening, hoping for answers that seemed always just out of reach. When he finally opened the door, his eyes were wide with a mix of relief and desperation. "It's you or me," he said in a strained voice. "I have no choice but to ask for your help." Before I could respond, he led me into his apartment, where I was met by an eerie silence that felt almost supernatural. He explained that his name wasn't Raphael, but rather something far more sinister, a spirit trapped within the walls of the old asylum. The building had been cursed, and those who sought refuge there often suffered a fate worse than death. Mr. Finchley's own daughter had been one of those victims, and now he was being haunted by her restless soul. Trembling with fear, I listened as he detailed his plight. "I can't bear to see another family suffer like mine did," he said, his voice breaking. "That's why I reached out to you, the person who might be able to help us both." Desperate to end the nightmare, I agreed to help him. We spent days researching ancient rituals and seeking out any knowledge that could release the curse. But as we delved deeper into the mystery, things grew increasingly dangerous. One night, as we performed a ritual in an abandoned room within the asylum, a sudden burst of cold air swept through the space. The temperature dropped rapidly, and I felt a chilling presence surround me. Mr. Finchley, already weakened by fear and exhaustion, collapsed to the floor. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the room, a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. It was the spirit of Mr. Finchley's daughter, seeking vengeance for her untimely death. With every word she spoke, the atmosphere grew more oppressive, threatening to consume us both. In a final act of desperation, I chanted an ancient incantation, calling upon powers beyond our comprehension. The air around us shimmered with a blinding light, and the spirit was banished from the building, never to return. Exhausted but relieved, Mr. Finchley thanked me for my courage and assistance. He promised that he would move on and lead a new life, free from the curse that had haunted him for so long. As I left the old asylum behind, I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory, and yet an underlying fear that the edge of perception was still lurking in the shadows. The battle may have been won, but the war within my own mind continued, leaving me forever teetering on the brink of paranoia.